Is that somebody coming? Oh, it's Amy. Right, everybody, it's 6 o'clock. Gentlemen, can you take your seats, please? Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'll read the in-person committee meetings, the last time I'll do it. This meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Members and officers, please remember to switch the microphone on when speaking and off when finished, and speak directly into the microphone. We don't have any remote people this evening, do we, Eunice? Can I skip that?
No, Chair, no.
Yeah. Right. Now, can everybody please ensure that your mobile phone is switched off or place it on silent mode? Thank you. Right, now to start the meeting. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies received from Councillors T. Malik, Aliyah Khan and Councillor Moore, Chair.
Minutes on page 5 to 12. Are they accurate? Can I sign them? Thank you. Right. Disclosure of interests?
Not at this time, Chair.
Yes, Amy, sorry.
Sorry, I was just double checking the minutes and I believe I was at that meeting.
Oh, were you?
Yes.
Okay, noted. Sorry about that.
Right. Are there any references from committees and other bodies?
No urgent businesses and no references, Chair.
Right. Now to start the actual meeting. Item 7. Colin, are you presenting this evening? Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Colin Moon, Service Director for Housing, here again. And Chair, if you recall, we was at Scrutiny on the 19th of September 2022 to basically ask you to comment on recommendations going to executive on the 10th of October to conduct a new consultation on additional licensing. And we will ask you to do that because we had a judicial review for the previous attempt to bring in place a scheme, and we had to essentially stand that down. So we came to scrutiny and we went to executive, and the executive gave us permission to undertake a new consultation. So today, the consultation essentially is before you in this report. So I just want to say a few words, Chair, if that's okay. So essentially the recommendation today is for scrutiny to support the recommendation to executive to consider authorising officers to proceed with the implementation of an additional licensing scheme across the town. So the last additional licensing scheme ended in 2018. Since the end of the scheme, the council has only been able to licence those HMOs required to be licensed by the Housing Act 2004. Therefore, HMOs with 5 or more people in them. The Building Research Report, which is at Appendix 8, estimated that there to be around 4,500 HMOs in the town, and over 3,800 of which fall outside of the mandatory licensing scheme. I mean, issues commonly encountered in HMOs are overcrowding, disrepair, etc., etc. A consultation was undertaken and ran from the 9th of December 2022 to the 10th of March 2023. The consultation report is included at Appendix I and, what is that, L? Can't read my writing, and summarised at paragraph 54 to 59. Over half, 59% of respondents agree with the proposal to introduce an additional licensing scheme, with just under half, 48%, strongly agreeing. The appendices include the draft additional licensing conditions, the Building Research Establishment Private Sector Stock Modelling Report, and the draft additional licensing fee structure. So Scrutiny is asked to consider the recommendation to Executive and the alternative options set out at paragraph 60 to 66. And also, Chair, I just want to first of all apologise that we did, these reports did go in a bit late because the consultation ended quite late and we had to put it together and then get it into the report. And also, there are quite a lot of appendices here, and part of the judicial review issues were around presenting all of the information to members. So we felt that we had to introduce some of the information previously as well as new information, and that's why it's quite extensive, Chair. So I've just introduced the report, Chair. It's essentially around the new consultation and the outcome of the new consultation, and I'm opening up to any questions from the floor.
Yes, Councillor Hussain.
Can I ask you, the first one, in terms of the consultation, there were some weaknesses in the first one, and then the incident in Manchester where the whole thing went to the court. Now, are you satisfied this time that we have got everything right?
To me?
Yes, but both of you.
I am satisfied, Councillor, that we have got it right. The last consultation period lapped across COVID, and we were criticised for having meetings, and we were also criticised for not having enough meetings and all of that sort of stuff. So I'm really satisfied that we've addressed that in that we've had face-to-face meetings, we've had meetings on Teams, we've sent out quite a lot of information via the web, we've hand-delivered information, we've actually extensively, in my view, consulted on this particular licensing scheme.
Can I ask you both, in terms of the legal challenge and all the expense that we went through, are you, as the portfolio holder and yourself, are satisfied that this time that there will not be a similar situation where you would have to withdraw it again and, restart? So members need to be satisfied that you've got done your homework, and this time it would not be challenged legally.
Satisfied last time, but some of the legal challenges, one of them was the reason we're here tonight, was that Scrutiny didn't scrutinise the report enough. So it's all been gone through, and every step of the way this time we've had an advisor what has told us what we need to do, how we need to do it, when we need to do it, and that is legal advice has been followed to the letter. So I am confident to turn around and say now, if the landlord and managing agents want to take us to court, we'll see you in court. That's how satisfied I am with it. We will see them in court this time.
Councillor, can I just respond to that also?
Yeah.
I think we are clear that it is likely we will get possibly another challenge, because during the meetings we've had with landlords, landlords are vehemently against licensing. They believe we've got existing powers and they don't believe that we should bring in a licensing scheme. And this is the third time we've attempted to bring licensing schemes in for the last 3 years. And given the conversations we've had with landlords, there are some who obviously are supportive, but there are a core set of landlords who are definitely not supportive. And I believe they will probably go the extra mile to bring in another challenge. However, I am quite confident that given where we were the last time, that we've closed a lot of those gaps, all of the gaps in fact, and I'm confident that we will bring in a licensing scheme.
To ask you, in terms of the implementation, how long, if it was challenged, obviously we don't know how long the court process takes, but how likely is it that it will be operational within the next 12 to 18 months? And my second question to you in that terms is, would that in light of what had happened and what the experience, would it improve the service to the tenants in terms of the rogue landlords, as well as improving the quality of housing? Because some of the places that I have seen where constituents have asked me, I certainly wouldn't put myself, any of my friends or relatives into those properties, because they were absolutely awful.
Thank you, Councillor. How long will it take? We've got a legal period of 3 months where we have to, as they say, designate a scheme. So if we go to executive on the 24th of April and we get permission from executive to implement the scheme, we'll then designate it. That'll be a 3-month period. So we're talking about the end of July, beginning of August, and we'll have a scheme up and running. Within that period of time, we have an early bird period where landlords can come forward and get a discount. And the last time we attempted to implement the scheme, quite a lot of landlords came forward. So we are confident that we can get this scheme in by the end of July, beginning of August. And I think the second question was, Councillor, I've totally forgotten it.
In terms of trying to improve the quality of the housing to what we have from some of the rogue landlords.
It's very important, Chair. We are only talking about the HMO licensing scheme in this part of the report. The licensing scheme for South will come in the next report. Yeah. One of the legal challenges is that the two things weren't separated enough. So this time you've got 2 reports, and that first one is just about HMO licensing for the smaller HMOs. The licensing scheme for South will come in the second report, just to make sure that's clear for any legal people listening.
Yeah, thank you.
So Councillor, around standards, we're confident that we will improve standards. We will have some additional resources as a result of, if the scheme is approved, we'll bring in some additional resources. And although we will have a number of landlords coming forward to license their schemes, we will follow up all those, because we're going to ask people to let us know if they feel there are licensed properties that people have not licensed, potentially licensed properties that are not being licensed. And we continue to do the work that we're doing at the moment, where we're working with the fire service who are finding HMOs that are not licensed all of the time. So we're quite confident that we will start improving standards in the borough if we get permission to bring this scheme in.
Councillor Chapman.
Sorry, did you hear that, Tom?
Yeah, I think you can repeat it, please, Councillor.
Sorry, how many officers, additional officers, do you think we're going to need to enforce this scheme? And do you think the income from the licensing scheme will be sufficient to do that?
One of the things the landlords have put in objections were that we wouldn't be spending all the money on the scheme. But the law says we've got to spend any money raised from the licensing on the scheme.
Yeah.
So the more what gets registered, the more officers will be able to employ. because that money can only be spent on the scheme. It can't be spent anywhere else within the council's finances. It's got to be relative to private sector out. At the moment, we're not talking about private sector housing, we're talking about additional HMOs.
Yeah.
That money has got to be spent on that scheme.
Yeah.
Nowhere else. So if we register 3,000 at 500, 150,000 in a year, that's possibly 3 extra officers pay for out that money.
And I know this is a planning issue, but also tying in with this, how will this help with us limiting the number of HMOs in any one area?
There is some councils that have declared roads full.
Yeah, I know.
With HMOs. There's a couple of roads in the town, especially in High Town, where you could very easily declare full. But till we know how many HMOs are in those roads, we can't declare it full, can we?
Yeah.
At the moment, HMOs above 5 people have got to be registered. That's a mandatory registration scheme. And we're still catching people with a lot more than 5 in. Under 5, they don't have to be registered. If this scheme for HMOs is accepted tonight and at the executive, they will have to register, because the HMO scheme is town-wide.
Yeah.
The same rules don't apply to the other scheme. That's under 20%, but HMOs is town-wide, the scheme. So hopefully we'll get enough people. When we catch people not registered,
Yeah.
if they accept just a PIN notice, then that money can come straight back to the council and the registration fee. If we catch them and they won't do that, we go to court. The shame about it is the money to get fined disappears into the court system then, doesn't come to us. But the more register, the more officers we're going to employ doing it.
Yeah. Just on one more, do you feel there's any potential in here to actually increase the fees? Because I think, personally, that some of the fees for HMOs are quite low and infrequent if we want to do what we really want to achieve.
So,
I don't think so at the moment, because the simple reason is we have got an awful lot of good landlords in the town as well as an awful lot of bad ones. We don't want to punish the good landlords in the town. By putting the fees at what we've done, they aren't going to be able to justify putting it on the rent, because mostly it's only £2 a week if you work it out over the 5 years. Less than £2, it's £1.80 a week. Less than a cup of coffee in the town. But the ones we get caught, what don't want to register, the bad landlords what won't register, then they will get caught up in the system later, and then that can be an unlimited fine, plus whatever fees we decide to put on for the people who hasn't registered in the first place. We'd have to do it through the annual charges, but once it's in the system, you can do that on a regular basis. But we don't want to punish the good landlords in the town. It's not them we're after.
can I just add to that? When we spoke about licensing last year, it was £488, and it's £488 again. And I think one of the criticisms we were getting from landlords, which wasn't justified, was the fee. And we've benchmarked that, and there's other local authorities whose £1,000 fee, £799 fee, etc., etc. And I think what's good about us keeping it where it is, there's been the cost of living crisis and other things going on, and inflation, etc., etc. We've kept it the same. So, in our view, it's positive, because the landlords actually can't say to us actually that we're taking advantage and going with inflation, etc., etc. They really can't argue about that particular point.
What I say is that you're obviously aware the private rents, new rents, went up 17.3% last year. 17.3% last year. And I just think, particularly with HMOs, where the yield on some of these HMOs is obscene, my view, that really we've got to be on top of that all the time.
We've had landlords Section 20 notices in the town just to get people out so they can get new people in to get more money in. I mean, one landlord, the minute someone might have permanent leave to remain received a letter, served them with a Section 20 notice to get out. And within a couple of weeks, the people got out, a couple of weeks, they got someone else in there from the Home Office at £90 a month more.
Councillor, it's important to note that £488 represents £8 a month, across the 5 years. Landlords are saying to us in the Landlords Forum that they're going to raise rents by hundreds of pounds, and we we pointed out. And I think it's really important that we don't want to put more pressure on private tenants, and possibly pushing that fee up may put more pressure on them because they may feel that that's going to get passed on in an inappropriate way to them through their rents.
It is my view. I don't think that's putting any pressure. They're choosing to put the pressure on the tenant. In terms of the scale of the budgeting for those properties and what they're getting in yield, these £8 are nothing as to them, as to what they're doing and charging up and manipulating the system. And I just think we have to be as hard as nails. You know, and all we should want in this town, if we're having HMOs, is the most tip-top out. And they can do that within their budgets. I've never come across an HMO landlord who actually runs them efficiently, who doesn't make an absolute fortune, and they create a win-win situation. You know, good en-suites, constant repairs, good rents. I just feel all those landlords that say they can't afford £8 a week, they really are screwing those properties. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's just it's a joke. So I do think I wouldn't feel that sorry for landlords. I'm a landlord. I declare it. I'm a landlord, but you know, not of an HMO. But anyway, it's just ridiculous.
Yes, Councillor Franks.
Mine's actually a comment. Chair, if you want to see if there are more questions before I come in.
Any more questions? Go on. Then. Sorry, I missed.
You forgot about me. Okay.
It's written down here. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of the questions have been asked again in a different way. The last time this came here, my challenge to you was how you're going to beat their solicitors, or their legal people. Are you going to find people, legal people, to be able to make sure that we don't find ourselves in the same place we were before? On page 20, I think bullet 46, it talks about the risk. Key risk is about the challenge from affected landlords and legal challenge from landlord professional bodies. Yes, there's a possibility, we all know, but my question would be, how probable is this? Because I don't want to come here and we're going to face the same thing again, where instead of poaching the legal team, we didn't manage and we're going to lose money. That's question number one. The question number two is to do with, on page 16, I'm the councillor for South Ward. As you know, the residents are fed up. They don't want this to continue. I think they're fed up with the number of HMOs in the South Ward. It says South Ward has the highest numbers and proportion of licensable HMOs. If we do this, are we going to have proportionate number of enforcers for the South Ward? Because I think it's only fair that this is done so that the South Ward, the residents can have some quality of life, and which at the current rate, they don't think they have. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. I think on the legal front, we've taken into account all of the issues that were raised the last time. I think one of the main issues was that we presented a report that dealt with additional licensing and selective licensing together. They're legally distinct and we've separated them, so we're discussing them separately. So that was a main issue. And the other legal issues we've dealt with, and you know, all I'm saying, and repeat myself, it's likely that we'll get a challenge, but we will robustly defend it. Because at the end of the day, as I was saying to some landlords the other day, this is about standards. It's about us providing the best standards in the borough, and they're only some of their only concerns was just about, you know, how much more money they have to pay, and it's not appropriate in that sense. So that's, I think legally we're fine. And as far as Southward's concerned around HMOs, we will have sufficient resources, and if we need to do something particular in Southward around HMOs, we'll do it. So if we have to do a blitz, for example, one day, one evening, whatever, we'll think about how. And if not enough HMOs are coming forward, or like landlords are coming forward, then we'll have to think about how we can go and get those HMOs, basically.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor.
just to follow up really on what was asked before by Councillor Hussain. From reading the reports, I know that you've taken a lot of trouble to try and do the consultations and so on to cover that off, and I'm pleased to see that. The only worry that I had was reading it as a councillor reading the data in the report, despite all of your efforts, the number of responses that you then get on to analysing, it's like analysing the minutiae, because the number of responses I would have thought was still small enough to give the rogue people a chance to dispute the report and the actions. So really what I'm looking for is a follow-up to what my colleague there had said in the first place, which is, are we really sure that despite the efforts you've made, the consultations are good enough? Because they don't look like it on paper.
On the additional licensing scheme, we've got a majority saying that they want the scheme in. So I'm confident about that. But what I'm even more confident about is the evidence of HMOs in the private sector and the evidence of the poor standards in the private sector. And we have to remind ourselves, although yes, we have to consult, we've got the evidence that we've got lots of HMOs, and we've got the evidence that the standards are poor, and we've got the evidence that there's a lot of antisocial behaviour, and we've got a lot of evidence that there's a lot of fly tipping. So we have a lot of evidence that the private sector, generally speaking, is poor, and we want to address that. So we've consulted, and it may not be as strong as we'd like it to be, but that's the nature of consultation. So I can't say why the consultation wasn't as good as I would like it to be, but all I can say is that the evidence is very clear that we've got to improve the standards in the private sector because the standards are pretty poor.
Just come back. Yes, you're absolutely right, and I'm not saying this because I disagree with the proposals that are being put forward, because I don't. I'm just worried that you can say, well, the majority said, well, the majority can be 3 out of 4. And it's very different to saying the majority if it's 30,000 out of a sample of the 32,000. There's a difference between a majority of a small number and a majority of a decent number. I get the feeling, reading the report, you're talking about the majority of a pretty small number, and that worries me.
Yeah, more people.
It's only worrying that's the issue, Tom.
Yeah, it's worrying me as well, and it worries us. But more people came out this time and took part in the consultation than the last time, which was encouraging. Those numbers weren't big. These numbers aren't big, and maybe it's consultation apathy or whatever it may be, councillor. We would like it to have been more and incontrovertible and without a shadow of doubt, but we have to deal with what we've got, and that's what we're doing. But I'll go back to the reasons why we're doing this. The reason why we're doing it is because we want to provide better standards in the private sector for private tenants, and we want to manage better those recalcitrant landlords who we are out all the time, and Adam is from the private sector team with the fire service many times, trying to close down properties because of fire safety issues, which makes lots and lots of people homeless. So there's good reasons why we're doing it, and I accept what you're saying, councillor, and I wish it was more, but it isn't.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
So Frank, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. A number of points come to mind. First of all, this is the third time we've seen this scheme. This time we have what I consider to be a very comprehensive 180 plus page report, which not only sets out the local situation very clearly, it sets out the objectives, and it goes in some detail into the extensive consultation that's been carried out and the responses that were received from that consultation. I would like to move that the executive be advised that, having considered the desire for improvements in the quality of rented accommodation and multiple occupied houses in Luton, having examined the extensive consultation exercise and the representations received, Overview and Scrutiny Board recommends the Executive Committee to authorise officers to proceed with the additional licensing scheme across the town.
One question, Chair. Could we have two resolutions saying that? One for the HMOs and one for the selective licensing?
We're not talking about selective licensing, we're talking about HMOs.
Yep. Yes, but did you see? I thought you said something about houses. I think that was what Tom was referring to.
Would you like me to read it again? I'll give you a copy, there's no problem.
But could we...
Having considered the desire for improvements in the quality of rented accommodation and multiple occupation houses in Luton, having examined the extensive consultation exercise and the representations received, Overview and Scrutiny Board recommends the Executive Committee to authorise officers to proceed with an additional licensing scheme across the town.
Yes, Candidate.
Could I just ask a question on what interest I have to declare? Because I wasn't going to declare an interest because I'm a landlord, but not of an HMO. I'm a landlord of a flat in Stopsley. So where do I declare an interest? And so I wasn't going to declare for this. Will I need to declare for the second one? Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, good.
Is everybody happy with that motion? Thank you very much, Councillor Hussain. Everybody agreed? Yeah. Thank you.
We're only talking about south. Okay. Yeah, so I'm okay. All right.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you for that, Graham. You can't go early, Peter. You've got to stay to the end. Item number 8. Colin, are you taking this one? Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So just to remind you again that we came to scrutiny on the 19th of September last year to ask that you recommend that Executive endorse our recommendations to go for a selective licensing scheme, and Executive endorse that we consult on the 10th of the 10th last year. So that's why the report is before you today, Chair. So the Building Research Report, which is at Appendix B, estimated that the private rented sector in Luton accounted for 29% of the 83,000+ dwellings in Luton, higher than the national average, which is around 19.6%. The BRE report identified South Ward as having a very high number of private rented properties. The ward contains over 9,000 dwellings, of which 49% are private rented. The report also identified South Ward as having the most private rented properties with Category 1 hazards, over 1,000. A consultation was undertaken and ran from the 9th of December to the 10th of March 2023. The consultation report is included at Appendix L and summarised at paragraphs 51 to 56. Around 4/5, 79% of respondents disagree with the proposal to introduce selective licensing in Luton, with 71% strongly disagreeing. Less than a fifth, 17% of respondents agree with the proposal, with 13% strongly agreeing. The appendices include the draft selective licence conditions, the Building Research Establishment private stock modelling report, and the draft selective licensing fee structure. Scrutiny is asked to consider the recommendation to Executive and the alternative option set out at paragraph 57 to 63. And Chair, we can see from the consultation that it's not as positive as additional licensing, but we're asking Scrutiny to just make comments, read the report and endorse our recommendation to Executive to actually implement a selective licensing scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions? Councillor Frank?
Before I'm the councillor for South. I don't need to declare any interest, do I? No. Okay, thank you.
Only one question from me. Are you proposing that the scheme should apply to South Ward as it will be from the 4th of May, or South Ward as it is now?
So, Council, we consulted whilst the boundaries were still together, the old boundaries. So we can only apply selective licensing in those wards. So the new boundaries we cannot apply in the additional areas that have made up the ward. If you understand my point.
I understand that very well. Thanks very much, Colin. In fact, it will still include the most important part, and much of the additional areas in South Ward are not as affected. So, I'm perfectly comfortable with that. At an appropriate moment, I'd like to move something.
Any other questions?
I know this is directly around this, but what effect do you think on the private rented sector in this area the government's proposal that EPCs have to be a C before they can be rented out is going to have?
With my climate change hat on, it's exactly the target the Climate Change Board has given to the rest of the council to try and force the private sector up to Band C. And looking at various options through grants, you probably see at the moment an awful lot of around Chorley, Beechwood, Poets, a lot of houses are having the external render put on and everything else. So we've already had a good start. Probably 700-800 have been done now. But we need to extend that to South Ward. And I had a meeting with the planners 2 weeks ago where South Ward has got a lot of the old Victorian bricks and everything else in the town. And one of the problems is because the terrace properties was putting the scaffold up and getting the properties after they've had the insulation work to look the same as they do now. And proposals come forward to go to development control officers because they believe now it will be a permitted development to actually be able to do the solid wall and the Flemish brickwork, the English garden wall, brickwork houses down there, do them with external render to a pattern what looks exactly the same that what's there now. So they have bricks cut into the render and everything else. But the big one, there's two things in it. The Climate Change Board has put a target of getting the private sector up to Band C. This will help get it up to Band C. But talking about a question you asked earlier, Bristol were at the same stage as us, and Bristol are facing yet another court challenge on their private sector leasing in one part of the town. Camden had to fight 2 court cases to get theirs through. The reason part of your consultation is low in South, it looks low, is you've got some people though who own 200 or 300 houses, you know, or manage 200 or 300 houses, and you've got one report, you know, you get one consultation back off them. I believe that we've gone as far as we can with the consultation. We're at the same stage Bristol are, same stage Camden were. Now it is time to take the landlords on in court if need be, to be able to achieve our objectives, and one of the main objectives is to get all private sector properties in the town up to Band C.
Yeah, no, the reason I say is obviously you're doing that, but this new government regulation that's coming in says that within 2 years you will not be able to rent out privately at the end of a tenancy a house that is below a C.
Let's see if it comes in.
Yeah, I know, but that would have a humongous effect on the private rented sector.
It's consultation, Councillor, and the housing lobby won't like that, so the housing lobby will make its voice heard.
Councillor Hussain.
Can I ask you, I think I'm a little bit confused, perhaps I've got it wrong. You're saying that your consultation was on the Old South Ward, yes? And the Old South Ward covered the area not very far from here, Cardiff Road, Cardiff Grove, Downs Road, where there are a huge amount of HMOs, yeah? Will that cover that? They cover that. That's now in Farley. It's not in South anymore.
All what the old South Ward was will be covered. If we wanted to cover the new South Ward, we'd have to go out for consultation again. So it's only on the old South Ward boundaries.
Yeah.
That's where it is.
That's what I'm trying to get the clarification, because there are considerable number of HMOs in that part of the town, near the post office and Downs Road, yeah?
The HMOs, as far away, the HMOs, so that would be under the additional, so you won't have to worry, every HMO will need a licence if it comes to.
Okay,
Doesn't know where it
thank you, yeah.
My understanding is the only part of the new South Ward that won't be included is Whitehill Avenue area. And so there's only a few at the bottom of Farley Hill that are really an issue. So it's, yeah. The old South ones are better than the new one.
Yeah, okay, that's satisfied me, yeah.
Councillor Wynne.
Yes, mine's only a comment, so do you want to finish with questions first, Joe?
Councillor Agby.
Mine's a question, but it's a question that I do support. I want to find out whether there's a process for determining who is fit and proper person. Have you had any challenge? Because this is really important that we make sure that those doing this are fit and proper person.
Oh yeah, yeah. So the fit and proper person requirement is defined under the Housing Act, and it's a test for suitability for someone to be able to hold a licence. And basically, how we test that is within. It's a test that's set down within the Housing Act. So they self-certify as part of the application process, which is they basically confirm that they don't have any previous convictions for fraud, dishonesty. They haven't contravened any housing legislation previously. So in some respects, we take it on face value. The test has changed slightly and got a bit more robust under the Housing Planning Act 2016, so we can take other matters into account. So for instance, whereas before we never used to take into account has someone got the correct planning and consent to operate this HMO in this area or operate this like this. So we can, if we find out that they don't have the proper consents, we can take that into account when we come to issue a licence. Now, just because someone has a conviction or something like it doesn't necessarily always make them not a fit and proper person. It depends what it was, the severity and how long ago. So we would have a policy in place. We do have a policy in place to deal with that. So again, someone that if we check our records and we find a landlord who's had loads and loads of complaints, just continue. We would consider that maybe they're not suitable to hold the licence, and they would have to appoint some other person. And that's not as easy as it sounds, because that other person has to agree and be bound by the conditions within the licence. So if there's an issue, they were liable, not that owner. So when you say to a land you can't hold it, it's a bit more, it causes problems. So that's how we would look at the suitability of those proposed licence holders. It's all and it's all on the application.
Councillor Wynne, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, I only had one comment to make, but bearing in mind the last answer we've just had, we keep drifting in and out of the HMOs and the non-HMO parts of the meeting, and your response now made reference to HMOs. Can we please try and make sure that when we're actually putting this through, I don't think this committee is in any way confused over the two, but we must make sure that there is no mix-up between the two. And we've just seen, I'm afraid, with your answer, that you've just mixed up the two.
Councillor, can I just clarify that? Fit and proper person test is relevant to HMOs and private rented sector properties across the piece. So Alan didn't mix them. He was just answering the question about fit and proper person, which basically is relevant to all private rented properties.
Thank you for that, Colin. I'm now happy, but I just want to be sure we don't mix it up because we're going to screw the whole thing up again. My only other comment was a very simple one, and that is discussion of change of ward boundaries. For goodness sake, don't let us start holding things up by worrying about the change of the boundaries. Let's get on and get something done with the one where we do think we're clear. Don't please start confusing the issue with new ward boundaries.
Councillor Franks.
You may have gathered, Chair, that I have actually taken my own legal advice through the Liberal Democrat Party, and I'm told that in view of the likelihood of challenges, the stronger the recommendation from Scrutiny and the more the recommendation makes it clear that Scrutiny has very carefully considered all of the implications, the less likely the challenge is to succeed. So, I move that the Executive be advised that having considered the desire for improvements in the quality of rented accommodation in the town, having examined the extensive consultation exercise and the representations received, Overview and Scrutiny Board recommends the Executive Committee to authorise officers to proceed with the selective licensing scheme in South Ward.
Everybody happy with that? Yeah. Thank you. 4 members disappeared. Debbie's actually asked me to ask you. What we want to do is, I'll read out what Debbie's actually sent me.